just a false truth. No need to argue. And yeah, I've had enough. You follow me anywhere I try to be alone. I find you there. There's more to me. Everywhere I try to go alone, I find you there. You follow me anywhere I try to be alone. I find you there. Oh, there's more to me. Anywhere I try to be alone, I find you there. I find you there.
Interesting week, I'd say. I've been a good kind of busy. A lot. Every time I try to simplify my gear, or every time I try to simplify my gear, or have a new idea of like, okay, I need to minimize maybe because I don't know if minimize is the right word, because there's still certain things that I need to make a podcast work. And since I started podcasting here, I've gotten really into multi angles, trying to make it just better quality picture, right? And with that, I feel like I've found, at least for now, I found my groove for I've found my groove for also content, and kind of like at least what I can do for now, right? Something that'll keep me consistent until the next idea comes for me, as far as podcasting goes. And so I add new gear. I have a couple angles here. I see, you can see me here now, and then I have up here. I have an A10 Mini that I literally just got today. I learned how to use it, kind of. I don't even have the software on my laptop yet, which I don't even want to put it on the laptop, because then I don't want to put it on the laptop because for one, it's use more memory, but also it's like, okay, the next step is really to upgrade the laptop, because even the laptop I'm using for the content, for the stuff, for the articles and stuff we're going to talk about today, it's borrowed from my family, and I prefer Mac, and I still think Mac is still Apple is still superior as far as the simplicity, but the ability of the products able to do. I was having a simple conversation about that recently, actually, because I think we were talking about upgrading phones. It was me and my cousin. We were talking about upgrading phones, and he was talking about trying to figure out what he wants to do with his. He doesn't use Apple. But I don't know if he asked me if I would ever change over, or I'm like, dude, between my phone and my MacBook Pro, everything's kind of set, and the best feature is that I can AirDrop. That's what that's one of my top 5 things that for me, there's a lot of features I don't even know about. I remember I had a friend back, this was years ago. But they used to always oh, did you know you could do this with your phone? No. It's they're download the Tips app or whatever, or what new features your phone has. And there's show you every single update and what details as far as and I never got into. So it's funny that I thought about that now, because as I've tried to simplify the overall arrangement by buying new gear, I always get to a certain point and I do stop learning, because I do retract myself to the Tim Ferriss, and we're gonna get into some Tim Ferriss today. Mark Zuckerberg was on his podcast this week, which is pretty interesting, and I was talking to Brian about that. But to finish this point, is I reach a certain point, and it's okay, I use my gear for this, and it's interesting because if you follow me on TikTok, or if you see my TikToks, Instagram, even the videos that I upload there, it's a good quality that I'm okay with, because it's not 4K, but it's above 1080. So it's like 2.7K, whatever that is. And at least if you're watching on your phone, if you're watching on the phone, most phones are. I mean, even if you play it in 4K, your phone's gonna go up to 1080. Basically, what it is. Maybe very high 1080. And me learning that, I was like, okay, like I know I can get. I feel like I can get away with certain things as long as I know that if I'm producing above 1080, then I can do that. Anyways, back to simplicity and me learning things. So like even learning the A10 right now, I was like, okay, I got the basics going. I can do multi-view. I can change on the fly. I'm not actually pressing the buttons on my computer anymore. I'm letting my computer just kind of work and read the software. And so my hope is that I can continue to evolve and while I am adapting my quality of the picture, I am adding to the creator space as far as the content itself, because that's what does sell, right? Stories are what sell. Stories are what make you interested in the first place. I know there's been times, and soon I feel like I will be going back to the previous 6 months to a year of episodes and start taking out those stories, those more detailed stories that I feel like bring out the best of Moving with Life, and what Moving with Life is in period. Because even I brought it up, I think with my cousin Matt when he was on recently, where there's something about chronological order that's important to me, and whether it's like new music or a podcast I've listened to that I'm like, oh, this is very interesting, or an article that I came across that I felt worth sharing. There's something about the chronological order of things, and so in keeping that, it's like, okay, how can I bring the best chronological ideas and information and content to the space? But yeah, that's I guess you could say that's my intro. New gear. I did already bring up that Tim Ferriss had Mark Zuckerberg, and I was saying Brian, because me and Brian had lunch the other day, and it was interesting. It's been interesting because I texted him today. I texted him pieces of the Zuck episode where I'm like, hey dude, like this is interesting, because I've noticed even since, and I don't remember what podcast he was on then. They were talking about Web3, but it was a podcast that Mark Zuckerberg was on back in like October time frame, and they were talking about Web3, and not really crypto, but just Web3, NFTs, Meta, especially because they had just switched over to Meta, and I wonder if he's getting into the, not his own podcast necessarily, but he's jumping on these podcasts because he's Mark Zuckerberg, and he has the pool, he has the able to be able to do that, to be like, hey guys, like I'm doing this. These are the. I am assuming that he's letting people in. These podcasts he's been on. He's letting them in on some of the know of like, hey, this is the idea of what I have Meta turning to. Because even on Tim Ferriss podcast, he was talking about how he has a 15-year plan, and when he said that, when Tim Ferriss brought that up, and Mark Zuckerberg, they didn't really go into it too much because Tim Ferriss does a very. I'm a very biased person to the way Tim Ferriss interviews people. But Tim Ferriss has a very awesome way of navigating away from everything that's like what you think you know about a person. Like that opening story was like about how Mark Zuckerberg would fence in high school, and he needed something to do in the wintertime, and fencing was what kind of like took over his time during the winter, and he mentions throughout, and at the end he ties it up. Mark Zuckerberg ties it up where he's like, this is one of the more interesting interviews and podcasts he's been a part of, because yes, they jumped into Meta, yes, they jumped into the metaverse and these things, but Tim Ferriss knocked out a lot of these big punches of information that let people really know and find out who Mark Zuckerberg is, because up until October of last year and through now, and listen to this episode with Tim Ferriss, I only knew him through The Social Network, the movie, The Social Network, and on there, obviously, it pictures him as a very, I was gonna say capricious, but I don't even know how to properly use capricious. I'm gonna look it up right now. It shows him as this very interesting character. Let me switch over to this one because I'm guessing that display turned off and it's been 30 minutes. So that's something I'm going to figure out because now she'll be back. Yeah. So, I was talking about capricious. I'm trying to look up the word capricious before the deal turned out. Capricious definition. But as far as the social network, it shows Mark Zuckerberg is a very person who's obviously very tech savvy, and he was just engulfed with being what has turned into Facebook, and now they changed over to Meta. And he talked about complacency and everything. Capricious, arising from or subject. Oh yeah, impulsive or unpredictable. Govern, apt to change suddenly, frequent, whimsical, changeable. Capricious is not the word I was looking for as far as like how they personified Mark Zuckerberg in the movie. But one thing that stuck out the most for me was towards the beginning, and we're gonna jump into it here in a second. Not this one. This one. So we'll listen to it real quick, and then I'll tie in just kind of the premise of why this stuck out to me, because it ties into something that Joe Rogan talked about on his podcast, which I haven't even listened to the podcast, but I did read an article, so I want to jump into this real quick, and then we'll
right now. What I'm hoping to learn more about are some of the influences, and the influences can take many forms. Right, one would be books, and I want to ask. This is from a profile in the New Yorker from 2010. And I remember this because I noticed it before I read it in the New Yorker at the time, which was, for a period of time, I think the only book that was on your profile on Facebook was Ender's Game. And I was wondering if you could, it is a great book. It was one of my favorites. And I was hoping you could explain why Ender's Game, and then if there are any other books that you have in particular that come to mind, reread or say gifted to other people, what those might be. But if we could start with Ender's Game, since it is also a personal favorite of mine, I'd love to know why Ender's Game.
I actually don't think it has any unique significance, so I'm surprised to hear that it was the only thing on my profile, but I do love it.
I turned off the mic. I guess this is the approach I'm going to take, is I have to pause in between. Now that I know how and I can. He's surprised that it was the only book on his profile. So then, if it's the only book on his profile, was he not the? Because my question comes to me is, was he not the person who created his profile? Like, isn't that how that works? Like, he created your profile. He's had his obviously forever, since the beginning of Facebook, since the beginning of time of Facebook. But many things like, so it's book Ender's Game, and I don't even know what book it is. I've never heard of it. I'll look into it because Mark, he's mentioned, but also Tim Ferriss says it's one of his favorites. Okay, it'll be something that I know I'll look into later on, not right now. Premise for this is that he did not know that book was on his profile, or that the fact that it was his only book. And this goes into like a bigger thing as far as like tech goes, because of the shadow banning that happens, and the critique of people, to include Joe Rogan, to include Jordan Peterson, to include Jocko at one point, which was crazy. And he was more mentioned on his podcast, and I was like, oh, like for me it didn't really change much, but for his it did. But I have seen people in that realm, Jordan Peterson, Jocko, Joe Rogan. I've never seen Tim Ferriss become shadow banned or anything like that. But it just stuck out to me. It stuck out to me like a sore thumb, because I was like, dude, like this book. Like, obviously you can have whatever. I mean, because it doesn't even matter about the book or what it's about. It doesn't matter for me. It's like, if you don't know what's on your own profile, and maybe you read it like 15 years ago and you forgot. Oh, but he said that he was surprised that was the only book on his profile, and so for the employees that fall under him that have the control to advertise to you or show you or lean you a certain way. Because there's been several podcasts and interviews where it seems to be factual, where these companies, Google, Meta, Silicon Valley in general, because I don't really know all of the companies over there, but for sure like Meta and Google, where if you look up certain things, it'll track it and it keeps your data. Google keeps your data, and you go from there. And so again, that's just something that's something that I've taken note of. Like, okay, like how because it stuck out to me. I'm like, well, I can't be the only one that this sticks out to. But I'll let this piece finish, and then we'll move on, because we'll move on to the Joe Rogan thing will be next. But it just made me think like bro, like I've been saying like a lot. It just makes me think that if you don't know what's on your, because someone has control, because someone else is using not using your profile, but they are keeping, not tabs. What's the phrase or word I'm looking for? They are the ones, because people use like editors and other PR people to push content on their profiles. Like Demi Bagby, she does a lot of workout stuff. She's a workout fitness person from Southern California. She does it. Chris D'Elia has a person, Tom Segura. All these guys have people to help them with their content creating, and because it's not always them 1v1. It's not always the person posting the content themselves, and that's not even a wrong thing, but it just, for me, it just goes down the ladder, because he's been in such a bind lately, at least through last year, having to talk to Congress and Google, all these people from Silicon Valley having to talk to Congress about privacy and the ability to sell people's information through advertisements and etc. It's just like, man, come on, bro. Like, for me, it just shows that in some sense, I think he's a brilliant person. I think he's a great person. But in some sense, it's like you kind of outed yourself by not knowing what's on your own profile.
It's a great book. I mean, I think that kind of science fiction, not just exploring certain technologies, but it's also a very compelling story and has good kind of moral lessons. There are parts of the technology and things in it, like the Ansible for faster than light communication across the galaxy, that we had a project at our company that we had codenamed that. Because we're all focused on communication. So yeah, I can't really speak to. I'm not actually sure why it was the only thing on my profile.
Just the only book. Yeah.
See, the only book on his profile. And again, it's a book. I mean, it could have been any book. Cool little side note is, and if, in case you want to watch it, I'm going to spoil it just a tad. So he's currently reading, at least whenever they recorded this episode, he's currently reading Way of the Warrior Kid by Jocko Willink to his kids, which is awesome. And it's funny because Mark Zuckerberg was like, "Oh, do you know Jocko?" And Tim's like, "Yeah, bro. Like he was. I am the first long form podcast that Jocko was a part of, and then turned into Jocko Podcast. And how I know him, and those of us that listen to him know how as far as know Jocko and his progression since like 2015, 2016. That I've been following him, and a bunch of us have been following him. But yeah, again, he remarks. There's a remark there where he says, I'm surprised it's the only thing that's on my profile. It's like, well, it's the only book, and Tim Ferriss, just corrects him technically, but it's like, what else don't you know that's in other people's control, that do want to get in your head and make you think a certain thing, or make you think that this person is bad and this person's better. In so many facets, whether it's politics, whether it's religion, whether it's both, the way things are run now, obviously CNN versus Fox, and that whole mess. That's definitely something that's it's something that has energized me. It's compelled me to want to even do this, as far as bring out. Yes, I am bringing something to light, because it's like it kind of puts a question mark in my head, but it's nothing really bad. There's just a bigger piece to this thing, and that's my only qualm with the whole situation. It's not about the podcast or him as an individual. It's just like, okay, if he's not the only one in control, but this is a stem. This is a network of other underlying potential problems. So I think that's the main little segment as far as that goes that I wanted to bring up. Oh man, I'm already running out of time. I knew I felt like I knew it was a little longer this time, but I wasn't sure. And I'm like, well, how long do I actually want to go? But let me let's move on to, let me close up this whole macro thing of basically what these last 10 minutes of taking part of. So Joe Rogan slams woke big tech employees as mentally ill. Now, I'm not speaking for him or the other party that he's talking about. Joe Rogan took aim at woke activist employees at large Silicon Valley tech firms, calling them mentally ill lunatics who are running the asylum to a certain extent. Rogan made the comments on his Spotify podcast during an interview on Wednesday with Antonio Garcia Martinez, which I haven't listened to yet. I will eventually. He's an ex-engineer at Apple and Facebook who parted ways with the iPhone maker after employees complained of misogynistic writings in his book. So he talked about that. Utter madness, lunatics running the asylum. And that's part of the main thing is that they consider themselves activists, and I don't disagree with like, no, you're an employee to a company. Your job is to do whatever coding that you need or whatever your job is. So Rogan said that when these workers are confronted over not getting work done, which, hello, that's what you're getting paid for. I'd be pissed. So if I were Mark Zuckerberg, and obviously he's not going to show or talk about this, and he doesn't have to. It's his company. It's probably him because he's like the founder, CEO, blah, blah, blah. Then he has managers that actually do the things. Then his day-to-day employees, which is totally fine. But so you're here for X amount of hours per day. This is your fucking job. You are not an activist. So it's like, how do you manipulate whatever? Maybe it is coding. Maybe it is pushing out certain content via Facebook, whatever company you work for. But it's like you thinking you singularly are an activist. Now compile that, because we know that Silicon Valley in general is like left leaning, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's the manipulation behind it that I do have a problem with, and that's what I don't like, and that's the reason why I'm bringing like Mark Zuck not actually knowing what's on his profile, or not that he has some. And that's something I thought about today as I was thinking about how I'm gonna bring this segment to this podcast episode. Was, well, he has a million things to do, but just because you have a million things to do, then anything that's public, you should be somewhat aware of. I'm not saying he has to be the one posting every day or whatever, or keep posting content on his profile, but when it comes to something like that, it's interesting that Tim Ferriss was able to find it, which it doesn't surprise me, but it just goes back to the argument of like, well, then if it's these people that are doing these things, then how else are they manipulating the system and taking advantage of the system to then push their own agenda? So yeah, I have to move on because then we're gonna run out of time today. But again, yeah, that's the biggest thing I wanted to bring for today. As far as that again, listen to this episode. Like, man, it's such a good episode. It's like an hour and a half, and it's nice. Again, it's nice hearing Mark Zuckerberg actually talk about what's going on, kind of in his brain. What he can talk only to a certain extent about future plans, and because it's future plans like that. This is how they create the business, which is totally fine. I am pro business. But it's the people under that umbrella that really get me questioning, motives of the overall people involved in the system. Not necessarily him, just the people involved in the system that have the ability to change things and manipulate things according to their ideology. Okay, shifting over to something better, is Rob Baird came out with a little, it's not even an EP, it's 2 songs. I think he released, maybe it was Memphis recently, because I know I heard it, and I'm like, okay, it's not bad. But then today, So I guess it's technically it's an EP. So 2-song EP. So it did come out today technically. But Freedom Lover. So maybe it was Memphis by him. I had already heard of. But Freedom Lover, which obviously the lyrics aren't out yet because they just got the song just got released today. Because I was just gonna show it. And also, I'm not gonna post the song like the way I would like to. I am considering starting a Patreon. I think I mentioned that. I'm considering starting a Patreon so that I can talk about and review these songs that I like, especially use something like this. It's like I if anything, I want more people to go listen to Rob Baird and Randy Rogers and George Strait and who's an outrageous one that I haven't listened to. Madonna, like whoever's Katy Perry's hot. But like whoever's bringing out new music, if the music is good, I am pro music. From vinyl from the 70s, the 60s, 50s to today, Rob Baird has this awesome song called Freedom Lover. It's a great simplistic like intro, so just with a snare drum, not even kick drum, real simple. Lyrics start, and then he goes into the first chorus. The line that stuck out for me from the first chorus was, "Let's get high as Jesus Christ, see how far these dreams can fly," and I listened to it like three. I had to go to I had to make a Walmart run, and so I was listening to it on the way over there, and I was like, and I heard it, and then finally on the way back from Walmart, I was like, "Let's get high as Jesus Christ, see how far these dreams can fly." I'm like, well, I mean, think of Jesus on the cross. At least that's what I was kind of thinking. I'm like, well, Jesus Christ on the cross, and then but the way he ties in, see how far these dreams can fly. It's like it's kind of an oxymoron, but it's that spiritual like lifting, or maybe not even maybe on the third day when you're resurrected, right? And when you're resurrected and you went to heaven, that's probably the better outcome. Now that I'm talking again, I was thinking about them like, man, and I don't have to make it this deep as far as like, well, why did he use the metaphor or the vision? Why did he use the picture of let's get as high as Jesus Christ? And it's like, well, because the first thing for me obviously it was like, oh, he got nailed to the cross. Like, I mean, he was physically high there, but now as I'm able to kind of debrief with you, it's like, well, maybe he means on the third when he resurrected and he actually was lifted and he resurrected again. See how high these dreams can fly. Overall, great lyrics. There's a couple of like, the reason why I wouldn't type in the lyrics myself personally, because there's a couple of words in the verses where I'm like, I don't know what he's saying. But the verse is good. It has a great build up going into the outro. He's a very simplistic in the sense of his lyrics can just paint you the picture and you're there with him. Even in the way he sings, maybe it was Memphis, definitely a different approach to maybe even Memphis. He's just kind of like upbeat. There's a Danielle Bradbury cover of her doing that song, and she does a great job. And Gonzo likes it because the drums, there's a drum fill in the end where he's just kicking in. And it's like, oh, it's super awesome. But Rob Baird takes a different approach to it. That's awesome. And those are the things that, again, are making me consider starting a Patreon. And because, again, the music parts, it's something that definitely makes me music brings me a lot of joy and emotion, and that's something that I can bring, especially when I'm able to get my friends in here and we're able to talk stories. When I'm able to get them more in here, and as the years come, because I also have a year's plan for this podcast, but but as the progression happens and I can continue making this content, there will be more music that would be posted. Like when I talked about it, I think I talked about it on Monday, and even last Friday, where I was on a Caitlin Butts binge, and the song that has me binging on her stuff is not Caitlin Butts, or not her newest stuff. It's not bad, but it won't always be this way. But the song Blood, that's the one that really just sticks out for me. And so yeah, go check out Rob Baird and his new song Freedom Lover, and then you can catch his cover of Maybe It Was Memphis. Super awesome. So let's do that. So we did that. Came out today. I did the Joe Rogan thing. The final thing that I want to end on, because today seems to be a tech day as far as conversation, as far as my thoughts and adding, buying new tech, with the exception of I bought a 16 millimeter, and I thought that it was gonna work with my camera. I use a Canon RP mirrorless as my main. That's my main camera. That's this one. This one right now is a GoPro 7, which actually works well. My quality is just as good as my RP for now. And it's a little lagged for whatever reason, but hopefully it won't be too bad on the actual upload and the live. But I got this 16 millimeter. I ordered it like to get here in a couple, like 2-day shipping, because I was like, I want it for this podcast. I want to get that bokeh. Again, I'm trying to up the quality at the very least, as I'm finding my way through actual content. And so, well, it didn't fit. So now I have a 24 2.8 on here, which is fine. It's not the worst. It just wasn't part of the plan, and it's kind of annoying because now it's like, do I get an M50 so I can at least use that lens? Do I wait? I feel like I'm going to have to wait now that I kind of got this setup going. I think it's okay. And so yeah. So that today seems so to tie in this final piece. I guess that'll be fine. Or I can do it up here. I guess that's the cool thing about like me kind of being able to just kind of like do things my own way. But here is Ryan Pineda with Derek Carr, quarterback for the Raiders. I don't even know if he's still the quarterback. Maybe he is, maybe he's not. But the premise is tech. Today is about tech and how we can use it for good and for bad. Sometimes it's not even for bad. Like, I don't think it's. I guess I don't want it to be. I don't want to think it's malicious. Intent. It is intent based on your belief, my belief. The person who's doing this, navigating their beliefs. That's why they're doing what they're doing. But Derek Carr makes a great point. We're going to listen to it once, and then we're going to get out of here for today. I kind of went into that Mark Zuckerberg stuff really a little bit longer than I anticipated, longer than I thought. The intro was fine, but it's like, okay, we'll go from there.
I speak to men like as dads, like you have to step in there, and no matter how you feel, like you got to do it, like, because if you don't, someone else will.
All you dads out there, like, we all got jobs, dude. Don't matter how much money you're making, we all have the same 24 hours. So how you use it's on you. That's right. Nobody's making you work the job you work. Nobody's making you make the decisions you make. You're in control. Like, you can do what you want to do with your time. And really, like, the big thing is your life is a reflection of the decisions you make with your time. At the end of the day, that's what it comes down to.
I speak to men like as dads, like you have to step.
So yeah, I don't have kids yet. I don't have kids, but I have cousins. I have younger cousins. I have cousins that I'm a little, I have cousins that are older than me, younger than me, and we've all been raised a certain way, and we're all evolving a certain way. And I see friends, and other people that aren't family, but they're friends, and they have kids, and people that I know that have kids, and just watching everybody kind of navigating it. And I just like the point that Derek Carr made, where it's like, if I'm not the one playing with my kid, then they'll be on TikTok, they'll be on YouTube, they'll be on whatever platform. I think they're good things. This is how we connect. I think I've realized in the past 2 years, especially given the pandemic, and my line of work, my day job, right? I've realized that having this type of tech and this ability to communicate around the world, really, to anyone, I forgot, I don't know if it was Tim Ferriss or somebody else, but maybe Jock, maybe both, I don't know. The framing of it was like, the ability to anyone that has an internet connection, you can communicate with anybody who has an internet connection. I have one here, so that's good. My friends, my family, when I'm gone, we can talk, and I have the resources and I have a Wi-Fi connection, so then I can talk with my family. And that's good. But in the case of parenting, it's something that I think will stick with me for at least a while. Where it's like, yeah, if you're not the ones with your kids daily, nightly, whatever that may look like. They already go to school for 8 hours a day. They already do whatever, daycare, school, babysitting, doesn't matter. But you as the parent, again, I'm speaking from a very detached point of view because I don't have kids of my own yet. But I think it makes a very good case. I know I've been very lucky to have my parents be the way they are, the way they were, the way they evolved to now. As they've gotten older, as I've gotten older, they've gone through their life and the way I've gone through my life. Definitely something that, at least at the very least, is something to ponder. And if you don't have kids yet, maybe you want kids in the future, maybe you don't want any at all. Sometimes I wonder, I've been seeing that in different scapes as far as like TikTok and Instagram, and and everybody's completely entitled to their point of view. But I just truly wonder, is like, okay, you don't want kids, but is it more of like you just don't want kids right now, which is fine. You don't have to want kids right now. Maybe you want them in the future, but to say you never want kids or you don't want to have kids ever, I just question that. And again, this is just my opinion, just my point of view on things. But as we get out of here, and thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. Today went by pretty fast. Mostly I went on a good little like 10-15 minute rant on who's actually involved in things, and that's the biggest thing. Like who's actually involved in things. In these companies that have a lot of control. They have a lot of control. Apple. I'm at the what's the word I'm looking for? I'm at the not Bane. I am at the door of Apple. I've been using Apple for I think it's probably been 10 years now, if not close. I've been 10 years now that I've been using Apple products in general, not only iPhones. But Apple, Google, Facebook, Meta, YouTube, which is owned by Google, which I knew it like a few years ago, but I didn't realize it really until the podcast started coming out and this data saving and keeping and selling and all this stuff has come to light. It's like, oh man, like the amount of YouTube that I watch is pretty crazy, but to think that all my information of every single video I've watched is in some tower somewhere in the mountains or something, because that'd be cold. It's pretty gnarly to think about. So anyways, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. I think I'm gonna talk through the song, which is fine. Take care of yourself, mentally and physically. I've been failing graciously. I've been failing wonderfully at trying to take care of myself physically, but take it one day at a time. It's not even a balance thing. It's just I'm taking it one day at a time and I'm trying to get better. If you have a team, if you have a household, lead from the front. Lead by example. Spend time with maybe it's your family, maybe it's your cousins, maybe your kids, whoever. Lead from the front, nonetheless. Lead from the front. Have a good weekend. Have a great weekend. Have a safe weekend. Don't drink and drive, please, for the love of the world. Do not drink and drive. Stay safe. Have fun. Enjoy yourself. At least here in Texas, it's been nice and warm. It's really warm. I haven't felt this type of warm in a minute, so I'm definitely adapting to that too. It was super windy recently too, like earlier this week. But anyways, I'm already reaching almost 40 minutes, and I'm about to be done with this song. So thank you. Y'all have a good one, and be safe.